Can you succeed by failing? Well, not only can you, but it's almost required. What am I talking about? Keep listening. On this episode of the Stamping is My Business podcast, we're going to talk about how to succeed by failing. And I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories. Seriously, I cannot wait until this time of year every year so I get to tell you this story. Although I now live in New Orleans, I was born and raised in and around New York City. Born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, lived in Manhattan for many, many years. And if you were a kid in the 70s, and I was, then you really were a baseball fan. Every kid I knew was a baseball fan. And if you are a baseball fan in New York in the 70s, you were 99 times out of 100, probably 999 times out of 1,000, a Yankees fan. The New York Yankees in the late 70s were unstoppable. They were one of the greatest baseball teams in history. And even though I was living in Queens and I could kind of sort of see from the top floor of my house Shea Stadium, which was where the Mets played, nobody liked the Mets. I mean, I could have lived next door to Shea Stadium and I wouldn't have been a Mets fan. The Mets in the 70s were pretty awful. But the Yankees, man, the Yankees were incredible. And probably one of the most incredible players on the New York Yankees was a player named Reggie Jackson. Now, Reggie Jackson was known as Mr. October. And the reason he was known as Mr. October was because whenever the Yankees would be in a World Series, and back then in the 70s they tended to be in the World Series every year, Reggie Jackson would hit home runs. In fact, very famously, in one game of I believe it was the 77 World Series, I should probably look that up. Yes, it was the 77 series. Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs in one game. In fact, Reggie Jackson actually hit 3 home runs on 3 swings. So the first swing, every time he got up at bat, it was a home run. It was incredible. And that game, as I recall, the story was actually being broadcast on national television with Howard Cosell. It was a big deal. Reggie Jackson was Mr. October. Reggie Jackson was the home run king, in our opinion. Reggie Jackson was so famous that, at least in the New York area, Reggie Jackson had his own candy bar. Seriously, Reggie Jackson had the Reggie bar. And I remember it was this big gooey piece of chocolate and caramel. I think there might have been nuts in there. And everybody wanted the Reggie bar because it was Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson was quite an amazing player. And so when everyone talks about Reggie Jackson, who knows Reggie Jackson, they think about home runs. They think about all of the home runs that Reggie Jackson hit. They think about that 3 home run game in the World Series. What's really interesting, though, is that when you look at the record books, Reggie Jackson doesn't hold records for home runs, even though we always think of him as a home run king. What's really interesting is what Reggie Jackson actually holds the record for. And the reason I tell this story this time of year is because May 18th is Reggie Jackson's birthday, but on May 13th, 1983, Reggie Jackson became the first Major League Baseball player to strike out 2,000 times. I want you to just let that sink in for a moment. Reggie Jackson was the first Major League Baseball player to strike out 2,000 times. That's one record Reggie Jackson holds. The other record that Reggie Jackson holds is most strikeouts by any baseball player ever in history. Reggie Jackson has struck out a total of 2,597 times. Again, let that sink in for a moment. 2,597 times. That's a lot of strikeouts. It's really interesting, though, that very few people actually know that fact about Reggie Jackson. Very few people actually know that he was the strikeout king. Because he was. I mean, he is the strikeout king. Why don't we focus on that? Why don't we know that? Because he was a home run hitter. And this is why I share this story with you every year. And it's funny because people have said to me, you know, your audience for this podcast and for Stamping Is My Business are 98% women. Can they really relate to this baseball story from the 70s? And, maybe there's some truth to that, but I actually think you all can. Because here's the thing. The reason that Reggie Jackson struck out 2,597 times is because Reggie Jackson was trying to hit a home run every single time he got up to the plate. Every time. Reggie Jackson wasn't there to hit a base hit. Reggie Jackson wasn't there to bunt. Reggie Jackson was there to hit home runs. When he got up to that plate, all he was thinking about every single time was a home run. And when you're swinging for the fences every time, you know what's going to happen? You're going to strike out a lot. You're going to strike out a lot. But you know what else is going to happen? You're going to hit a lot of home runs. And at the end of the day, those home runs are going to be what people remember. Those home runs are going to far outweigh those strikeouts. I mean, there's actually a story in Yankees lore, Yankees history. Billy Martin, who was just a character and the manager of the Yankees during that time, at one point called on Reggie to bunt. And Reggie refused. And instead, when he got up to the plate, he swung. Instead, he didn't bunt. And there was actually a very public fight between Billy Martin and Reggie Jackson in the dugout on television because Reggie wouldn't bunt. Because Reggie wanted to hit the home run every time. And hopefully by now, you understand why I'm telling you this story. In business, so many of us are afraid to fail. We're so afraid to fail that we don't take risks. We're so afraid to fail that we don't give it our most intense effort. Because we know that there's probably a safe middle ground. We know that we have a greater chance of moderate success if we play it safe. And if we decide to swing for the fences, there's a decent chance that we're going to strike out instead. Successful businesses, successful business owners are trying to hit the home run every time. And yes, they're going to fail. They're going to probably fail more than they succeed. But even if that's true, the successes are going to far outweigh the failures. Another sports analogy, I believe it was Michael Jordan, who said, you miss 100% of the shots you choose not to take. You miss 100% of the shots you choose not to take. And what happens in business, and what happens with a lot of stamping business owners, is that they choose not to take the shot. They choose not to run the risk of failure. But when you don't run the risk of failure, guess what? You also do not run the benefit of success. You want to swing for the fences every time. You want to hit the home runs. And just know that you're going to fail. I recommend a lot of books. I recommend to all of my clients that they try to read as much as possible, a lot of business books and biographies. Let me tell you, the greatest business people, if you read those business biographies and autobiographies of great entrepreneurs and business people, you will see that the first half of the book is just a list of all of the things that didn't work for them. All of their failures before they had success. That's life. That's okay. Accept that you're going to fail. Accept that you're going to strike out. But also understand that when you do strike out, you're going to get back up to bat. And when you do fail, you're going to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and try again. And when you succeed, you're really going to succeed. When you swing for those fences, when you connect with that ball, you're going to hit a home run. That's how Reggie Jackson did it. That's how successful business people do it. And that is how you should do it as well. If you enjoyed this episode of the Stamping is My Business podcast, please feel free to like it, share it, subscribe to it, and listen to more. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, our website, stampingismybusiness.com, and on our Facebook page, facebook.com/stampingismybusiness. If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, please email them to me at john@stampingismybusiness.com. This is John San Pietro, and I'm just trying to get you paid.